6 Japanese fighters circle above. Below them, a single Allied bomber struggles through the humid sky, one engine coughing smoke, metal skin already torn open by cannon fire. Inside the cockpit, the heat is suffocating, sweat runs into the pilot's eyes. The radio crackles with broken warnings. Every man on board knows what comes next. They have seen it before, the chase, the overshoot that never comes, the slow, methodical destruction from behind. Standard procedure is simple. Push the throttle forward, fly faster, pray harder. But this pilot does something that makes no sense. He pulls the throttle back. The bomber slows dangerously. For a brief moment, it feels like surrender. And then they fly past too fast, too close, too late. In that split second, the rules of air combat collapse, guns find their mark, formations break, confusion replaces certainty. What happened in the sky over New Guinea in 1943 would later be studied in flight schools, debated in briefings, and quietly passed from pilot to pilot. Sometimes survival does not belong to the fastest aircraft. It belongs to the one that thinks when everyone else reacts. He was born in 1918 in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, far from any ocean and farther still from the idea of aerial combat. His father was a career military officer, disciplined and precise. His mother played piano and read poetry in the evenings. Their home smelled of pipe tobacco, old books, and quiet concentration. From an early age, Jay Zeamer Jr. learned that clarity mattered. Mistakes were studied, not shouted over. At the dinner table, conversations drifted toward puzzles, logic, and how things fit together. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, people noticed how deliberate he was. In high school in Maine, Zeamer did not stand out. He joined the debate team and the science club. On weekends, he built model airplanes, obsessing over weight balance and wing angles. If a model failed to fly, he did not get frustrated. He adjusted it. Teachers called him meticulous. Classmates called him strange. In 1936, he entered MIT to study civil engineering. He learned how structures held under stress, how forces moved through steel and concrete, how failure was rarely sudden, it was cumulative. He graduated in 1940 with solid grades and no grand ambitions. War was approaching, but Zeamer did not look like the men recruitment posters celebrated. Flight training did not transform him. Instructors noted his technical competence, but questioned his aggression. Zeamer was assigned to bomber duty, then reassigned again. He moved between squadrons like a tool no one quite knew how to use. He watched how crews reacted under pressure. He kept a notebook, he asked questions. Too many questions, according to some officers. While others played cards or wrote letters home, Zeamer sat alone with technical manuals and after-action reports, sketching diagrams in the margins. He was not trying to be brave, he was trying to understand. And slowly, without anyone noticing, he was preparing for a moment when understanding would matter more than rank. By early 1943, the 5th Air Force was bleeding, planes were lost faster than they could be replaced. Crews rotated through missions, knowing the math was against them. Survival often came down to luck, and luck was not a strategy. Zeamer had flown more than 40 missions by then. He was still a captain, still overlooked, still described as technically capable, tactically conservative, but among the men who flew with him, a different reputation had taken hold. They noticed he never wasted time. They noticed he never raised his voice. They noticed that when things went wrong, and they always did, he narrated the problem calmly, as if naming it could shrink it. When an engine fire broke out over the Bismarck Sea, he did not shout. He called out oil pressure, altitude loss, trim adjustments. When flak punched a hole through the fuselage big enough to see daylight, he adjusted speed and heading without drama. Panic, he believed, was just another variable to control. More importantly, his crews kept coming home. The difference was not dramatic. No miraculous escapes, no daring dives, just fewer hits, fewer damaged planes, cleaner exits from hostile airspace. It was subtle enough to dismiss as coincidence, but patterns began to form. Zeamer paid attention to how Japanese fighters approached. Their discipline impressed him. Their predictability intrigued him. They attacked from familiar angles. They committed fully. Once they chose a line, they trusted speed and momentum to finish the job. He began to make small changes. A slightly slower approach to target. An altitude shift just enough to throw off anti-aircraft timing. A delay of seconds that broke the rhythm of an attack. Nothing reckless, nothing that violated orders, just marginal adjustments that forced the enemy to react instead of execute. The results were measurable, even if no one wanted to admit it. Crews flying with Zeamer took fewer hits during pursuit. Gunners reported clearer firing windows. Enemy fighters disengaged sooner. The margins were thin, but in the air, thin margins were everything. Zeamer never framed these outcomes as brilliance. He called them probability. He believed that air combat at its core was an equation, one distorted by fear, speed, and chaos, but still governed by physics. If you could disrupt the equation, even briefly, you could survive it. Other pilots laughed at that idea. They trusted instinct, they trusted throttle and firepower. Zeamer trusted timing. By mid-1943, he had quietly assembled a crew of men who shared one thing in common. They had all been passed over, a bombardier still marked by malaria, a navigator who had once crash-landed at sea and swam for hours, a gunner demoted for refusing an order he believed would kill his crew. They trusted Zeamer not because he inspired them, but because he respected the cost of their lives. He briefed them with numbers, not slogans. Fuel burn, time over target, diversion paths. If this happens, we do this. There was comfort in that clarity. None of them believed they were invincible. They believed they were prepared. And preparation, Zeamer believed, was the closest thing to courage that actually worked. That belief would be tested soon on a mission so dangerous it was listed as voluntary, deep into enemy territory, with no escort and no margin for error. The mission was posted quietly, no speeches, no encouragement, just a line on a board that everyone understood meant trouble. A reconnaissance flight north, deep into Japanese-held territory near Bougainville, photograph airfields and shipping lanes, expect heavy resistance, no fighter escort. It was listed as voluntary. Most men walked past it without stopping. Zeamer did not. He accepted the assignment without hesitation. His crew followed, not because they believed in heroics, but because they trusted his math that if there was a way back, he would find it. If there was not, no one else would do better. Before dawn on June 16, 1943, their battered B-25 sat at the edge of the runway at Dodora Airfield. It was an old aircraft, patched and scarred, written off more than once. Ground crews worked in silence, taping over seams, checking fuel lines, pretending not to look at the men climbing aboard. Zeamer walked the plane himself. He checked the gun mounts. He confirmed the fuel load. He reviewed numbers with his navigator one last time. 17 minutes over target. If we take fire, we head east. If we lose an engine, we glide here. No one asked what happened if they lost two. They took off before sunrise, flying low over dark water to avoid radar. The ocean below was empty and black. The cockpit smelled of oil and sweat. Radio silence held. As the sun rose, they climbed to photo altitude. Japanese installations spread beneath them, runways, fuel depots, transport ships laid out like a diagram. The bombardier began snapping photographs. Then the first zero appeared. It came from below, fast and deliberate, sunlight flashing off its wings. Then another, then 4 more, 6 in total, moving with practiced coordination. The rear gunner called contact. Zeamer acknowledged without changing course. The photo run was not finished. The Zeros did not rush in. They circled, they waited. They expected the bomber to panic, to break, to run. That was when bombers died. When the last photograph was taken, Zeamer turned east and pushed the throttle forward. The chase began. Cannon fire ripped through the tail. Alarm screamed. Hydraulic pressure dropped. The bomber shuddered, wounded, but still flying. Zeamer watched the fighters close in. He counted their spacing. He noted their angles. He waited. When the first Zero committed fully, he pulled the throttle back. The bomber slowed violently. The Zero overshot, streaking past the nose. For the first time, the gunner had a clean shot. Tracers walked across the fighter's fuselage. Smoke poured from its engine as it spiraled away. The next attack came harder. Zeamer did it again. Throttle back, slight flap, another overshoot, another burst of fire. Confusion rippled through the enemy formation. Their timing broke, their certainty vanished. This was not a dogfight, it was disruption. The remaining Zeros attacked erratically now, unsure of what they were facing. Zeamer varied his responses, sometimes slowing, sometimes dropping altitude, sometimes accelerating at the last second. Each adjustment stole seconds, each second bought survival. Eventually, the fighters disengaged. The bomber limped home, riddled with more than 500 bullet holes. One engine failing, hydraulics gone. Zeamer landed without brakes, skidding off the runway into mud. The crew climbed out in silence, shaking. They were wounded, exhausted, alive. They had completed a mission that should have killed them. The real reckoning did not happen in the air. It happened later, under canvas, in a medical tent that smelled of antiseptic and damp earth. Zeamer lay on a cot, bandaged and pale. Shrapnel had been pulled from his shoulder, bullet fragments from his legs. A flight surgeon worked quietly, taking notes. Outside, mechanics stared at the bomber in disbelief. It looked less like an aircraft and more like evidence. A colonel arrived without ceremony. He did not congratulate anyone. He asked one question. How did you survive? Zeamer answered the way he always did, slowly, precisely. He explained the throttle reductions, the timing, the way speed and momentum locked the attacking fighters into predictable paths. He talked about energy states and reaction windows, not bravery, not instinct, physics. When he finished, the tent went quiet. In the American military, innovation has always lived in a narrow space between brilliance and insubordination. What Zeamer had done violated instinct, tradition, and every training reflex drilled into pilots since day one. Slowing down under attack felt like heresy. But the results were undeniable. The photographs he brought back were invaluable. Airfields, fuel depots, shipping lanes, intelligence that saved lives. And beneath that success lay an uncomfortable truth. Doctrine had failed where thinking had not. Officially, nothing changed overnight. The maneuver was not written into manuals. No sweeping orders went out. But pilots talk, word spread through debriefs and mess halls. Some dismissed it as a fluke, others saw the logic and tried it themselves. Not all succeeded. Timing mattered, nerves mattered. But enough crews came home to prove the idea had merit. After the war, captured Japanese pilots described certain engagements with confusion. American bombers that behaved incorrectly. Aircraft that slowed or shifted speed at moments that broke attack rhythm. Uncertainty crept in, and in aerial combat, uncertainty kills aggression. From a broader perspective, Zeamer's action reflected something deeply American, not recklessness, but problem solving under pressure. The refusal to accept losses as inevitable. The belief that even in chaos, systems could be understood and disrupted. It was not a loud revolution. It was a quiet adjustment. A seed planted in this collective thinking of pilots who would never know the man who planted it. But they would live because of it. Jay Zeamer Jr. never flew another combat mission after that day. His wounds were too severe. The war moved on without him, loud and relentless, but his part in it grew quieter. He was sent stateside and reassigned to training. There were no parades, no spotlight, just classrooms, briefing rooms, and young pilots learning how to survive their first missions. Zeamer taught them without drama. He talked about timing, about anticipation, about reading the air instead of fighting it. He never framed it as a trick. He framed it as thinking. The maneuver he used over New Guinea was never officially named. It never became doctrine. It didn't need to. It lived in conversations. In debriefs, in the quiet moments when pilots compared notes after making it home, a reminder that speed alone was not salvation. That unpredictability could be protection. When the war ended, Zeamer returned to civilian life. He became what he had always been, a builder. He designed bridges and water systems, structures meant to last. He married, he raised children. He attended a few reunions, shook hands with men who remembered that mission more vividly than he ever described it. He rarely spoke about the war unless asked. When he did, his answers were short, factual, almost understated. He let others tell the story. He never corrected the myths. He never added himself back into the center. He died in 2007 at the age of 88. His obituary mentioned his Medal of Honor. It mentioned MIT. It did not mention the moment he pulled the throttle back while 6 fighters closed in. Most people who read it never knew what he had really given. But the idea endured. Decades later, flight instructors still talk about energy management, about disrupting expectations, about timing over raw speed. The language has changed. The principle has not. Zeamer's insight was simple and dangerous. Sometimes the safest move is the one that feels wrong. Sometimes survival belongs not to the fastest, but to the calmest mind in the cockpit. If this story reminded you of someone who stayed quiet but carried the weight anyway, write their name below. If you believe intelligence can be as powerful as force, stay with us. These stories aren't loud, but they matter.